Hello and a very warm welcome to the Mindshift. With me is a very special guest today. He is Gireendra from Pentathlon VC. Gireendra, my sheer pleasure and privilege to have you. I must also tell the viewers that Gireendra and I got talking at the recent Digital Innovation Summit in Mumbai, and a very powerful exchange of ideas, especially on artificial intelligence, one of the most transformative forces that we have in the world today. This podcast, which really sort of talks about how we are rethinking innovation, very apt to get Giri, who has some very interesting ideas on how AI as a concept should also go beyond the metros. First of all, Giri, I think a good idea to sort of begin this conversation by talking a little about yourself and the firm. One sort of understands that you have been a builder of the company in the past and now backing companies. So, what really led to that transition?
First of all, Shrija, thank you so much for inviting me. I had thoroughly enjoyed being on your panel and the event that you talked about just now in Mumbai. And then, like you said, I had really enjoyed your newsletters and then the exchange of mails. And so, really glad to be here on this podcast. So, thank you so much for inviting me. To get started, the question about how I got into this VC world. Um, yes, I have been for a long time, almost 3 decades, as a builder of companies. So I happen to be a mechanical engineer, but in the 90s, it was all computer science. Everybody went to computer science, and I did too. And I built a couple of companies before I got into this, and I call them as my first inning, second inning, and now the third inning. Clearly, the first inning was more of I call it my MBA. Learned the ropes of the doing business by doing it. Actually, the second one was a longer and a more successful company. The first one was survival was success. The second one was building a large testing company, and it got acquired by a global leader from Germany, listed on the London Stock Exchange, and so that was a very good exit. I really enjoyed that journey. Uh, and what happened during that period when we had done the acquisition, I was in for a few more years building the company in India, was that I got involved with startups. So Pune has a very strong Thai chapter. We have a nurture program there, and I got involved in mentoring some of the startups. And that's where I realized that Pune had a lot of energy, entrepreneurial energy in terms of lots of students come here to study engineering, study management. It is an auto hub for the longest time, and now an IT hub. So unsurprisingly, a lot of entrepreneurial energy and ideas and so on, but not a single fund. So all the funds happened to be in Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. That gave me that initial trigger that if we could do something with this, then starting a fund would be a very good idea. So clearly, when I was exiting out of my earlier role, the thinking was whether to start another venture or start a VC fund or a startup ecosystem which will support multiple such founders. And that was the idea that I went with. Of course, it took me some time. So I had that idea, but when I exited, it took me about 3 years to start both the things that I'm currently doing. One is the Pentathlon Ventures fund that you talked about, and we also build a startup ecosystem in Pune called Ideas to Impacts Hub. Of course, fund is with partners. Ideas to Impacts Hub is more my own idea, and that is where we have built in the Baner area of Pune a very well-known startup ecosystem. So that took me about couple of 3 years or so. So I can't pinpoint a particular moment when this got triggered. And as it always is with most of the things in life, it's a journey. It's always a journey. It doesn't happen very quickly. So that's where we are now. So in the third inning has become a fully focused startup ecosystem play, where there is a VC fund, which is now in its fund two journey, and a startup ecosystem called Ideas to Impacts Hub.
Thanks for that, Gireendra. And like you said, that you can't sort of pinpoint a particular moment when you sort of thought about this, but it's a long journey. But one sort of sees your writings, and we find that you have been a big fan of a model called the smart town model, and essentially decentralized offshoring. So, what really is that idea? Walk us through that. And more importantly, why do you think one has to distribute innovation beyond metros, and what makes the model work in practice?
Excellent. I mean, that was initially that thought entirely. That was that whole idea that while I was in the company before I got into this, I could easily see that we had some 1,000 people in the company. Easily, more than 500 came from smaller towns outside of Pune. They didn't come from Pune. And that was initially the thought that, that means that talent is there, colleges are there, it's just that the infrastructure probably was not there. And could there be something that we can take from the metros to these smaller towns, where then those folks don't have to come to the metros for jobs. So that was the initial idea. And the tagline we have for Ideas to Impacts Hub is indeed distributing the future evenly. And where it comes from is a North American technology writer called William Gibson. He has this original quote that the future is already here, it's just not distributed evenly. I thought that was a very powerful statement, because that's what we see, right? Somebody coming from village to Mumbai will probably think it's the future, but it's not the future. It's just not distributed to him yet. And that is what we thought we could be doing, is that distributing the opportunities, and that's the future really, to the people in the smaller town. Now, why it works is that. For example, in the startup context, now it's mostly that's what we are seeing. Although I started with the services idea and trying to build the services businesses from these companies, I'm seeing more and more that traction coming for startups as well. And I'll come to that also shortly. Because simple thinking is this: that 5 years back, Pune did not have a fund, and we started a fund in Pune. So that was distributing the future to Pune. Now, 5 years later, where could the places be where there could be opportunities? And I have indeed myself traveled to Surat and Baroda and Ahmedabad and Lucknow and Bhubaneswar, Nashik, Aurangabad, Kochi, Mangalore, all of these places, because I really feel that a lot of such these opportunities could actually be coming out of these metros. These could be the newer opportunities. Everybody would know about what's happening in a Bangalore or a Delhi, or now even in Pune, but people would not know, and those would be real opportunities that would come from these kind of places. So regarding the startups. You asked me why it makes sense and why would it be different and so on. So clearly there are advantages of being in the larger towns. The ecosystem is there, you can meet a lot of people, you can exchange ideas and all of that. There's no doubt that there is a having an ecosystem is a big boost for any startup. There's no question about that. However, I do feel that a startup journey always starts with a problem, right? The problem that you're trying to solve, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, every startup is trying to solve some kind of a problem. I feel that people from the non metros, the tier two and tier threes, face a different set of problems, which are also very interesting, which are also very big, and give rise to large startups. And the fact is that the founder has to have a founder problem fit, right? And he or she should have affinity to that problem. Only then he'll be interested in building that. So a metro founder may not have that kind of an affinity to something that is a problem in the non metros or the tier 2 tier 3 towns. So that's where I think the opportunity is. So that's where it starts. After that, of course, they will have challenges in terms of finding the ecosystem and finding the wherewithal to grow the business from there. And that's where a lot of these companies are almost immediately they try to raise funding. They try to they're told to come to a Bangalore or a Delhi and so on. So that's where the journey continues. However, the idea was that could we do something reverse? Could we have startups grow in where they are, where the problems are? And in fact, indeed, is heartening to know that in our fund too now we do have, for example, a company from Surat that we have invested in. Surat is by no means a small town, really speaking, but in terms of startup ecosystem that we are talking about, it's the next year, and we were able to get one company from there and investors from there as well. So all these towns that I visited was for that reason. You not only meet investors but hope to get some companies out of there as well, and we found one in Surat. Yeah.
So, Gireendra, what are distinct kind of differences that you see from founders coming from metros vis-a-vis tier two, tier three? Like, how is a founder from a Surat say different from one from Bombay? Are they change in attitude, preferences, problem solving? What do you think are very sort of distinct differences?
Definitely, there would be differences, right? There are definite differences because your uh, people around you, the ecosystem around you, shapes you in certain ways. So, if you're in a Bangalore, you're expected to, present yourself in a certain way, and certainly that presentation part is may not be there in the smaller towns. But we are seed stage investors in Pentathlon. We invest in early stage, B2B tech kind of companies, and that's where it is very important, as you can imagine, focusing on the founders is extremely important. Whether the founders are extremely entrenched and passionate about the problem that they're solving or not, how much do they know about technology to solve that problem, and so on. So when you come to that kind of a thing, we do find people that have probably even more passion for the problems that they are working on. And sometimes it is the style versus substance kind of an issue, that they may be lacking a little bit in style, but they more than make up for it in terms of the passion that they have, the substance they have for the problem that they are trying to solve. So nothing against anybody. There are different ways that entrepreneurs can succeed, but since you specifically asked about what differences do we see, then these are something that we like. That we like grounded founders who are well aware of what is happening on the ground in their team and so on, and they're constantly looking to learn from what is happening around them. So that those things are good qualities to have for founders, in my opinion.
So great, style over substance is what you sort of mentioned, and that's a fair point, sort of
Mhm.
taken.
Oh,
That in some areas
substance,
it's style over substance, some it's more
substance over style, yes.
over style. Like that's what I was saying. So style
Okay.
over substance is more a metro phenomenon, and substance over style more non-metro. Right.
And don't get me wrong, even in metros, we have invested and we have found those. Absolutely. I mean, there are three founders in our Bangalore right now, and they are definitely that. Uh, if you look at the statistics, maybe that will hold. But we do look for founders who have very strong substance. That's all.
Yeah, so I think taking the conversation further, Giri, like you said about that we are very, very focused on substance. We like people who understand the business model, the technology. I want to understand from you that unlike other VCs or the private equity world, which is known for more financial engineering, all of you at Pentathlon come from a very operator mindset. So do you think that diligence models or decision making model in your firm is different vis-a-vis like a classic VC fund? I mean, how is your decision making, you think, different, just being an operator's lens, far more different than the others?
Well, I think whatever I was talking about must have flown from the fact that we were ourselves operators and we had run our businesses, and that's how we got into it. And we felt that as a fund, we could probably, especially at the early seed stage that we invest in, we could help the founders with more than just the fund. We could share or use our own experience of having expanded in India, gone international, raised money, exited. All of those things could be useful to when talking to the founders. So that was the thesis. And the what we are now in our fund two, and in our fund one, we kind of, this hypothesis got validated, in my opinion, that two parts were there to our thesis. One was the B2B tech part, not focusing on B2C but B2B, but the second part was the operating background. And to be honest, when we saw that out of our 23 odd companies that we invested in, as many as 17 raise their follow-on rounds, then that was a validation, one for B2B, but also for our founder background, that we didn't go get carried away by the valuation thing. If you remember, our fund one was a 21-22 period when the valuation is very high, correct? And the liquidity was high because of COVID and so on. So the valuations, if we had gone with those, then probably there would be down rounds now. But if you're doing step up in valuations, it goes back to our operating background, thinking that we focused on the problem being solved, the founders who were solving it, rather than playing the valuation game. So it did help that we had a founder background. The founders tell us, to be honest, that the discussions that they are with us are a little bit different than the discussions that are elsewhere. And of course, everybody has their strong points and weak points. And if, for example, we being founders could be more empathetic to them and understand the challenges that are going through, whereas the financial background would help with some other aspects. But to give you a specific example of how that helped, was not actually in the selection of a company, but what happened later. This was in the fund one company, which was in the travel expense management space. Okay, and you can imagine what happened with them in COVID. Correct? I mean, they just were in negative revenue territory. It was a really, really bad time for them. But what we could see was that every time the COVID was subsided, they were showing increase in their revenue. So there was a lot of resilience. And believe it or not, we were not the leads earlier, before when we first invested, but during COVID, we raised a round for them to get them out of that trouble, and we led that round. So that was kind of worked really well, because that is what got them out of that spot. And of course, when COVID ended, these guys were growing 100% month over month, and in a very short while, they got acquired by a US leader in this space, and we got our first exit. So it was a good story all around about that founder background. Just to finish that story, the founder who got that exit is an LP in our fund too now. So it really tells you about the answers the question that what kind of difference does it make sometimes that you have the operator background.
No, no, that's so well put. The operator background thesis. Diligence is different. You are really with the founder, and you said you use the word empathy.
Mhm.
That the empathy towards the founder is so well understood. Not to take it away from those who are doing more financial engineering. I wanted to understand from you, Giri, that you have also written about founders doing AI for the sake of AI. Almost every deck coming your way with .ai, and
Mhm.
I think this entire AI washing, which is really happening, I mean, we have greenwashing and sustainability. We are seeing AI washing right now because perhaps the founders think that this is the music to the ears of the VC, which is why everything is .ai right now. What is your message to those founders who perhaps are adopting the strategy, especially in the B2B space on AI for the heck of AI?
Yep. A very good question, Shrija. Thanks for asking that. I was in one of these forums. I was on the stage, and somebody asked me, "What is your view of the future? What's going to happen in the future, like 2 years, 3 years down the line, and so on?" So I said that nobody can tell the future. I cannot be very sure about what's going to happen in the next year. But one thing I can be extremely sure about, that in the next year, whatever decks we are going to get are all going to talk about AI and how AI is building their product and so on. So that much is very sure, because I think partly it is that what you said is that founders sometimes think that the investors are looking for AI. Whereas when I talked about our B2B tech thesis, it is very clear that it is where the tech is bringing disruption to the B2B use cases. So we are not even talking about funding companies that are building the tech. Okay, so there is a different category that is building the tech, and then there is a different category, application layer as you call it, where which is applying that tech to the particular problem at hand. And the tech could be, I mean, we ourselves have seen in fund one, it was more AI ML. Then last year it was Gen AI. Now it is agentic AI. Next year, next fund, it will be quantum computing. So the tech will keep on changing. And that's where our focus on those boring use cases, which were there 50 years back and will remain 50 years later, but technology is bringing the disruption, is what we are focusing on. So for me, actually speaking, if somebody says AI first, my flags are actually on, because it is true that existing use cases can be thought of, can be reimagined using AI, and then obviously you like that better than somebody who's just changing the use case by applying AI to it as a layer above it, and that may not be the best way to use AI. So it is possible in an AI first kind of a thinking that you're taking a use case but applying AI first so that the whole use case is reimagined. But that is possible. But more often than not, what happens is hammer looking for a nail kind of a thinking. I have AI now, what I can do with it, what kind of use cases I can solve with it, and so on. And to our mind, if you don't know the problem very well, if you're just doing a hammer looking for a nail, you will not succeed, because the problem being solved is very important. So in our founder mix, when we're looking at a team, and the founders are very important to look at the seed stage, what we are clearly looking at is, apart from, let's say, the technology knowledge, because that is bringing the disruption. Of course, you have to have the business savvy, the hustle, and all of that. But the third and the main important thing is the domain knowledge. Do you know the domain where you're trying to solve the problem? Because even to know that that problem is big enough, and the solution that you're bringing to it is really solving the problem, is extremely important. So we definitely think that has to be there in the mix. And only then, at least in our thesis, there could be other theses. I'm not saying that there won't be other ways of succeeding, but in our thesis, at least my advice to startups would be that AI is fine, it's the technology that you're using, but what is the problem that you're solving? That is very crucial for us.
So I think just taking that conversation further, Giri, that you spoke about this AI first thinking, right? So what really are the 2 or 3 practical checks that you do? Like you said that it could be a potential red flag for you also. It sort
Mhm.
of sets the alarm bells ringing when
Mhm.
you are fashioning yourself as an AI first startup, right? So
Mhm.
if you can just give us some examples of two, three practical checks that you employ when you are diligencing on a startup, what would those be? Is it
Yeah, yeah.
how
I
so?
almost answered that in my earlier question that if it is just tech founders who are trying to build AI to solve whatever problem, then we
Hmm.
would see that as a red flag because we will want somebody to have the domain knowledge. So there has to be in that founder mix somebody like that. And secondly, if you're trying to build AI, then where is the data coming from? That is a very important question to ask because otherwise, what do you have if you don't have data? Now, in the case of AI ML, that was one question that we used to always ask. In Gen AI, it is very interesting now that again we are talking B2B, so we are talking enterprise applications and so on. Where will the data come from? So it's a different kind of a question that gets asked to us is that this whole Gen AI seems a very suitable play for tech giants with their LLMs, with their GPU resources, energy, and all of that. What a small company, the seed stage companies that we are trying to work with, where will they find their role? And our answer is actually that in the data lies in the data because all the tech giants that we'll have is mostly social media data. They will not have the data of enterprises which is lying in the CRMs and ERPs. Correct. So that is where we see the opportunity for our companies. So the question to ask them is, how do you have access to data? When they're working with enterprises, they will have that data from their customers, but they should have that access. So they may be very good in Gen AI building the platform, building the guardrails, making sure that the outcomes are right, but the data has to come from somewhere. So that is the other point that we look at.
Okay, so talking a little more about artificial intelligence opportunity, and you spoke about that Shrija has taken a learning curve of its own, what began with a more AI ML approach to what we are seeing now, generative AI. So tell me a little more about that, Giri, in terms of the opportunity set. Like you mentioned, a lot of startups or companies come to you thinking that it is more in the LLM side, right, which is taken by the big giants, that space. Where
Mhm.
exactly do you see the opportunity? It's more in the application layer. One kind of thinks about like the way you're talking about that you can take the data from enterprise level,
Mhm.
but even
Mhm.
for the enterprise kind of philosophy that you are building on, where exactly is the opportunity? Because if everything is being built on, say, a chat GPT and DeepSeek, how do you distinguish one from the other? Because from a distance, they all start looking the same. And data is ultimately the enterprise data. So you are basically taking somebody's data and building a layer upon it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So, what exactly is the defensibility or the moat that the startup is bringing to the table? That is still not clear.
Right, right. So let us go to what the stack looks like for this Gen AI kind of an application. So you're talking about the GPU layer, which is the hardware at the bottom of it. Then we are talking about the LLMs, correct? And on top of that, then we are talking about data layers, the application layers. And in that also, I'll say differentiate between the industry layer and then a company layer. So our advice to our companies, the seed stage young companies, was always that you don't even worry about the GPUs and the LLMs and so on. You focus on the company data, the data layer, the application layer, and that is where, as I said earlier in my previous question, you go to the company customers, they have their enterprise data, and on for that you build the best application because you have really got a chance to build it better than the tech giants also because of the access of the data that you have. Ultimately for startup, that's the thing, right? I mean, even 15-20 years back, people used to ask questions, what if Google does this tomorrow? Today it's, what does OpenAI do this tomorrow? That's the question that you're essentially asking. And the answer is that if you're focusing on a particular niche, now why would you succeed in that is because you have that access, but why would that enterprise also let you stand in the door? So for two reasons. One is that you know the domain really, really well. If you don't know the domain, they won't let you, stand in front of them. And secondly, you are really good at this Gen AI technology also, so that you are building a platform, the guardrails, and so on, which can ensure reliable outcomes, more reliable than everybody else. So you can also see this, right? We are talking about small niche problems, and that the enterprise need to be solved. If you throw an LLM at that, so large, it's like boiling the ocean, it's likely to hallucinate. So you do have a chance of building better solutions by doing SLMs, by doing the fine tuning, by applying your domain knowledge, all of that to build the right solution for that particular right niche is what our advice to our startups was. Um, Obviously, this is going to be a little bit of a long answer because I'm first sharing my thoughts or our thinking at Pentathlon, but there are other views also, and I'll talk about them also. Clearly there was a change that happened because DeepSeek came in, correct? And DeepSeek then allowed even the startups to have some play in the LLM layer, right, with the doing it cheaply and so on. But even there, our thinking was, or our advice was, that even so, let that be a play for the large B2C players, because they will have a lot of data. If you are B2B, you're still focused on the enterprise data, so let still focus on the company data. So that is what we were thinking. Now if you look at all of these different layers, a lot of work is happening, a lot of investment is happening, and so on. And there is GPU, Nvidia is the largest company now, by valuation ever. And then in the LLMs there are 4 or 5 very large players who are also building that. But sometimes I tend to think that ultimately what is going to happen with that, it's like cloud of today, right? There are 4 or 5 players, there are only the large players who can provide cloud. But even that differentiation between their offerings is not that much. That's just going to be the
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
roads of that, of that country, for example. It's just plumbing, it's just the infrastructure. And the differentiation is probably going to come on top when the problems are actually getting solved. So hence we do see that if our companies focus on that, there is a definite opportunity for them to succeed, for them to do better than that. Now recently there is something else that is also happening, that I talked about, that company layer, or that, and then industry layer. There is definitely a move towards saying whether the industries themselves can be completely disrupted using AI. uh, Now this is there are some investment that have recently happened, where you're taken industry, you back young and very smart techies, uh, uh, and then they may or may not have the domain knowledge of it, but maybe the thinking is that nobody told them the problem is hard, so they go and solve it, or something like that. That even without having like a lot of domain knowledge about it, can the technology, which is AI, can these smart people disrupt those entire industries with AI solutions? And obviously, these are bets being taken, and these are large bets being taken. A lot of money is being put, because this will need, if you're talking about a complete industry, or if you're talking about horizontal solutions, then you will need a lot of money to put into it. And who knows, in future will tell that maybe 1 or 2 of these bets do succeed. Obviously the funds that are putting money behind this have a large corpus, and they will take 10 or 15 such bets, and hopefully some of them will work. uh, like I was saying earlier, this is a different view being taken, and it might have some results. Our view is that the bottom up, in the sense that if you become a champion in a particular niche, there'll be some other champions in some other niche. And what could happen is that if some companies are growing larger, then they will consolidate by going into the adjacent spaces and taking over those kind of companies, and that's how larger companies will build, but continuously solving business problems. And that is the way they are expanding and growing into the leaders that we want to see. Obviously.
understood. Yeah, understood, Giri. I think what the point you're trying to make is more vertical, is more niche kind of place in the
Yes,
AI
yes,
space, right?
that is our thinking. Yes.
Yeah, solving a, like, take a smaller problem to begin with, right?
Mhm.
Be more
Yes.
nimble footed about it, and more B2B approach and more vertical in nature,
Mhm.
rather than having a very B2C large LLM kind of approach, which you think, even though a lot of funding is also going in that space. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but you
And
think perhaps a more B2B kind of an approach sort of works better.
No, I just wanted to clarify there that when I talked about the industry layer, it is still B2B, but
Hmm.
trying to solve the entire industry problem or a horizontal problem. So these are larger problems, but they're still B2B. And hence, the bet is that AI will be able to do that with very, really smart techies, but with a large funding to do that. Whereas we are talking about B2B, but smaller niche problems. That's the difference. B2C is completely different. We are not even, going there. Yes.
Okay. So, Giri, we spoke a little about AI first. In
Mhm.
fact, we spent considerable time on that, talking about your thinking and thought pattern, the business model. What do you think? What about this entire terminology on AI native, right?
Mhm.
Especially for B2B sort of SaaS startup space. I mean, like, what really are you seeing the difference between AI native, like an AI first kind of philosophy?
Mhm. To me, it was initially confusing. I felt that both these terms are being used interchangeably.
Hmm.
AI first and AI native. But it looks like there is a difference. AI first is what I talked about earlier, where use cases are being reimagined with AI in mind, and hence they could probably solve in a completely different way and in a much better way, and so on. So, for example, you could have an agent who's doing exactly what a human is doing. Okay, in a particular agent. When I say AI agent, it's an AI agent. It could be doing exactly just replicating what a human is doing. On the other hand, if you're talking about agents talking to agents themselves in a workflow, then it is not exactly like the humans operating. There could be much better ways, more efficient ways of doing that. So there is possibly a way of defining workflows differently with having AI first kind of a thinking. Only thing I mentioned there was to watch out for this hammer looking for nail kind of a thing, because everybody's doing AI. Let me start thinking of AI. Let me solve whatever problem I can find that is best suited. So that was the only thing. AI native, on the other hand, seems to be where without AI, those use cases in themselves won't exist. So you're talking about, let's say, the chat GPTs of the world and so on. That will not, exist at all. So those are the cases where I feel those AI natives will be more in the horizontals or more in the B2Cs, as you call them, rather than the kind of B2B use cases that I was talking about, because we always start with that B2B use case. Whereas the AI first, chat GPT, it cannot be considered B2B. It's a more horizontal kind of a platform. Of course, it can be applied, used by businesses also, but that's a horizontal kind of a platform. So that is where I see more play for these AI natives, where these use cases themselves have come up because of AI, and then that's what they're building for. On the other hand, I was talking about those boring use cases which were there earlier and which will remain for 50 years later. So maybe not for us, but we do would like to see AI first thinking, which is truly different thinking based on AI to solve for the use cases that need to be solved. Yes.
Thanks for that, Giri. I mean, we spoke about AI native and AI first. What basically one understands is that AI native is like from your thinking. Initiation starts with AI. That
Hmm.
use case would not exist without AI.
Yeah.
And AI first is essentially like you're integrating the AI features in top of something which is already existing, right? Giri, if you were to give me, say, three examples, like a
Mhm.
reverse pitch, a lot of startups pitch to you. But
Mhm.
if you were to give me, like, say, three use cases from an AI first kind of category in the B2B space, which you would like to see and not necessarily seeing as a pitch to startups, what would those ideas be?
Uh, I would just first like to clarify that when we say AI first on anything, because our focus is solving for a use case, we don't even really care if you're just AI or you're using other technologies or a real combination of technologies also. That is
Mhm.
what really matters, what solves the problem, in the best possible way.
Yeah.
So hence, I would not be looking for this AI first kind of an approach. I would be looking for, and I have many examples of that they are using Gen AI where it makes sense. They are using rules where it makes sense. We have invested in a company recently, which is in the lending life cycle, and you'll think lending में अभी क्या करने का बाकी है. But this company called Neurofin, with a founder who's extremely deeply entrenched, typical of our founders, that they are all 40 plus, they are very deeply entrenched in the domain, found that space where Gen AI can be used to look at documents which are required for secured loan approvals, and that they want that to bring that TAT down to 1 day. Now, if you do that, then the throughput increases dramatically. Now, is it that they're using only Gen AI for this? No, they're using rules also in some other, for to solve for something else. They will use a combination of things for getting the solution right. So that is what we are looking for. That are you optimizing the solution rather than saying your AI first? Some other case, there is a company, One Stack, which is focused on cooperative banks, for example. Now they are using Gen AI for the language thing,
Hmm.
at Indian languages, because cooperative banks, it's a hugely spread out kind of a sector, and they would use Gen AI for the language thing, not necessarily remaining in English. But their basic technology could be very different. They're using the UPI stack, the NPCI stack, essentially to reach the merchants of the banks and so on. So whatever as a combination makes the right kind of solution, that is what we are looking for. And certainly there is a role for AI to play, and they should be using it in the right kind of a way. That's what we would look for. I hope I answered the question. Yes.
No, thanks for that. And I think that exactly what we were talking about, the combination of various technologies. I mean, the difference is in the approach. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be AI for the heck of AI,
Mhm,
like
mhm,
you
mhm,
pointed out, right? So AI could essentially be defining things and making it better, but not necessarily that you go with it, or it has to be an AI first
mhm,
company.
mhm.
Giri, tell me a little about the evaluation framework or the assessment framework which the VCs use in most sort of defined models like, say, e-commerce. You always have VCs talking about the customer acquisition cost and things like that. Of course, it's more consumer space. In SaaS, of course, you look at more annuity income, how much money is coming from your long-term clients and things like that. Do you have repeat clients? I mean, for something like AI first or the combination of technologies that you're talking about, where things are moving so rapidly, when technology itself is evolving so fast, what really is the fair amount of valuation assessment framework that a VC firm like yours employ?
uh, Valuation is always the tricky thing, right? I mean, see, the fact is this, that and I go by my own experience with Fund One. Um as I talked about earlier, during that COVID phase with a very high liquidity and all that, the valuations were crazy. I mean, we are trying to see how we could not have not invest in companies which have no revenue but still asking for the moon in terms of valuation. And then it all came down, right? Ironically, when COVID went away, the liquidity also went away, and suddenly everybody was talking about funding winter. Correct? You remember in 23, everybody was
Yeah,
talking about funding.
I know, yeah.
And what we used to say was, this is normalization. What was happening earlier was crazy. Now it is just getting normal. And we
Yeah,
were actually happy about that, because now we could have decent valuation. Now we could actually talk to companies for 3-4 months instead of they saying, oh, do din mein bolo nahi to there is somebody else, and so on and so
right.
forth. It was actually good for the, so the kind of balance of power and move from the startups to the funds, that was good. But then what suddenly happened is the large funds started talking about what are the VCs focused on now? AI, Gen AI, and so on. So it is, I think, in the required in the VC industry that there is some kind of hotspot that we have to find, and then that is the place where then you again start getting high valuations. That is what we also see now. That if it is AI, then, or if it is AI first, like you're saying, then suddenly the valuation goes up. And like we did in the fund one, we are also very careful now also, that just because it is AI, can we give them high valuation? And it
Hmm.
helps us. Truly, it helps us that we come from this B2B SaaS background, where you mentioned the SaaS metrics, all the metrics, the unit economics, the CAC, the ARRs, the churns. All of those things are really important when we are talking about the B2B use case. Underlying technology changes. We also, from fund one to fund two, instead of B2B SaaS, now we call it B2B tech.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, the SaaS remains a delivery mechanism or whatever. But
Hmm.
in fund one, we were saying, for example, Shrija, that this classic subscription model was going away. People were using transactions, and we just thought of that as an evolution of SaaS rather than SaaS being dead or something like that. Ultimately, what customers want will happen. So instead of classical seed-based subscription and all that, you were getting transaction-based, and that was fine with us. Then came the second element for us, actually, was the hardware part. SaaS was completely software. And then we realized that, especially with AI, the data is important.
Yeah.
And what is the source of the data? Sensors. So there is hardware which is actually part of the core solution, differentiating part of the core solution, because of the quality of data issue. And hence today we have one company called Intellithing, which is actually manufacturing sensors for vibration monitoring and so on. So if that's why we moved from B2B SaaS to B2B tech. However, for us, the tech remains the tool to solve for the use case. And hence, whatever our thinking was earlier about what could happen later, when the solution is in terms of revenue growth and all of that, those metrics still we follow. Only thing that will change probably is, because we are seed stage, we could look at what is happening in the downstream funds, and
Yeah.
if they are giving higher valuation, and hence working backward, should we give that higher valuation also? That is the only thing. But rather, we would like to stick to the SaaS capital index. If you heard of if you about it,
Yeah.
that was the multiple of valuation in the public markets for similar companies or the same sector companies. And then you work backwards to see that if the growth rates are higher, what kind of valuation you can give. because these AI companies, you don't have public company data, as much with them right now. It's early stages right now.
Yeah, yeah,
There
yeah.
could be this bubble, but we would like to stick like we did in Fund One with valuations that we can justify rather than give higher valuation just because it is AI. I do understand that in the competitive nature of things, you have to think about, if there are other funds who are giving more valuation or something like that. But the same balance that we used in a Fund One, which gave us results in Fund One, we should use in Fund Two also.
So I have to ask you this, Giri, and I think sometimes you can actually see the momentum in a sector from early stages itself, right?
Yeah.
Even for a seed stage investor, you're already seeing the kind of liquidity that is available for these kind of companies at, say, a Series C or a Series D level also, right?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
mean, OpenAI came up with a statement that they will be $100 billion company by 2027. Gartner has actually called AI in the category of hype cycle. Technologies will keep evolving. What is your sense from your vantage point of view, where you are seeing the activity, even though the seed stage level? Do you actually believe that there's hype building in, or do you think that there's sanity just crept in?
So this is a question that we keep worrying about day and night, right? Because as a fund, we are worried about the next 5 to 10 years, and
Mm,
then you cannot neglect what is happening. So that will be undershooting the target that you think, oh, nothing is going to happen, but things are going to happen. But there is a risk of overshooting as well, right? I mean, you could think that a lot of it is going to happen, and it doesn't happen, or doesn't happen in the time frame. It makes a huge difference to us as a fund if things happen that you are predicting in 1 year or 3 years or 10 years. It could mean life and death for a fund, correct? So
yeah.
you got to worry about that as well. And hence my own view that is building now, and taking into account all of the things that you talked about, is that indeed AI is going to take its rightful place in the market, but not before a bust. The bubble has to bust a little bit, and then it will happen. I'm talking about two different bubbles. One is this, open AI, wanting to reach 100 billion by in another 3 years. Nvidia being the richest, highest valued company. Oracle has gone into the, mix now. All of these people, these are large companies. So one could say that a lot of these companies are investing from their books. It's not even, investor money. So it's kind of a good thing to happen, and it will
Yeah.
probably,
It's
play
like
out.
profit money.
Huh,
Yes.
yes, it's prop money. So if Microsoft or Google is investing, or Facebook, that's their own money, and probably they could sustain that. Unlike in the internet boom period, there are very lots of parallels, and people do talk about internet boom bust that happened in the context of today's. Yeah. But that is the main difference. It is not investor money, and it could, think about it. But in our own case, that is a really a little bit of a further away from us. What For us, what is more interesting is what is happening in the application layer. And there, if people are trying to build industry solutions by putting in a lot of money behind it, just betting that tech will change it, that's a much closer to home kind of game for us, and that we need to really watch for. And that is where we are taking a stand that, the use case is important. We have to fix that. Let this be a game or a bet for the larger funds who can put that kind of a money. We see that for our kind of a fund, we got to stick with what we are seeing, and there is a path there also. In fact, we see that these companies can build better solutions, and that's what we will have to stick to for our fund, and with the thesis that I've talked about. Yes.
Okay, so Giri, sort of what is sort of keeping you going in terms of if you were to mention like one underrated opportunity, which the
Mhm.
founders are perhaps not looking at in the, you want to call it the tech space, combination of technology space or the AI space, what would that really be?
I mean, one thing about the field that we are all in is it's changing so fast. It's very exciting, and also challenging in another way. So when we started off, our thinking was that the B2B, I mean, like I told you, we are focused on B2B 5 years back when the country was actually B2C. Ola and, Flipkart were the marquee names, whereas we came with our own B2B background, and hence we started focusing on B2B. Luckily, for 5 years later, nobody asked that question, because now, B2B is known and
Yeah.
preferred more actually, and it's one third of India's unicorns are also B2B. So all of that happens. So
It's a
what I'm
more
talking,
discovered space now.
huh?
It's a more discovered space
More
now.
discovered space now, and the more that. that was the transition that we talked about in that part. So hence continuously things will keep on changing. Now, for example, our one of the thesis that we had was catching these Indian companies, Indian startups young, and taking them international. And we have investors from the Bay Area also, and even to them our thesis was that what are we bringing to the table to you are the seed stage Indian companies, right? Because even if today we have a US fund as a feeder fund into our India fund, uh, and we are allowed, as you know, 25% we could invest in companies outside of India. Our thesis was that we don't do anything new by bringing you companies that are already in the US and so on and so forth. So what the opportunity that we are bringing to you is the seed stage opportunity of Indian companies, and then they could get leadership into their niche, and that is what the opportunity that we are bringing to. So that is what we were talking about then. Today what has happened is, uh, whether US is the only market to go international, and now we are saying that Gulf is probably a market for us. In fact, we have now prominent family offices from the Gulf for investors, and they want to see what they call in-country benefits, meaning what the Indian companies can do in the Gulf. So that's music to our ears, that we could have some companies that could go to the Gulf and then become successful. You got to see what's happening around the world in the US and so on. And we are very happy that we have this Gulf avenue that is now available. The third thing that now is building, in my opinion, is the Indian market itself. The I mean, typically what you see, we have seen also, is that Indian startups, they will build in India, but then the next step is always going international.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very hard to build for the remote Indian market sitting in India. Also, it's easier to probably go to the US or some other country. And to me, I'm thinking that whether Gen AI or the new AI that is coming is the game changer that is going to happen for that space. Meaning that can now these the products can be taken more easily to the remote markets in within India, because then Indian opportunity, which is very large, also comes in. I always think that new technology always brings in new people under its footprint. And with Gen AI, it's clearly the non-English speaking people, correct? And so, if Indian population is as diverse as we know it is, with people speaking different languages, then Gen AI could be the technology that could bring in a much larger population of people into the footprint of Gen AI technology, and that could be a big opportunity if you're talking about the next 5 years, 10 years, and so on. And I clearly see spaces that where this is already happening. Fintech is already gone there. We have seen that, but edutech, healthcare, and agri, all of these spaces could really benefit from Gen AI with this language barrier being broken. The only thing that, and I see that as an opportunity actually, is that the models that will work in India for this kind of a market, to my mind, are actually the B2B2C models. And I'll tell you quickly why I say that. Unlike many other countries, India is not a DIY or do-it-yourself country. So if you throw some technology at people and some product at them, it's very unlikely that somebody in the village will pick up some app and start using it.
Yeah, yeah.
We will need somebody in the middle who holds their hand and brings the benefits of that technology to the end beneficiary, and that's what I'm kind of calling B2B2C. So all these banks and schools and hospitals and all of these people will have to do that through somebody there who can actually go to the people and bring that benefit. And to my mind, these intermediaries, they could be small people also. They are village level entrepreneurs, or banking correspondents in fintech, we call them, or teachers, nurses, whatever you call them. These intermediaries are going to be very, very empowered because of Gen AI.
Hmm.
That's for sure. So Gen AI is going to empower them, and they will in turn make sure that the benefits go to the end beneficiaries. Now we all know that India is a very entrepreneurial country, so there are going to be a lot of these
That's an
people.
interesting food for thought.
Yeah. So that's what, maybe we're not seeing it now, but if you're talking about the next 5 to 10 years, with Gen AI coming in, with AI coming in, I see that as an opportunity, that in these spaces like vectors, sectors that I talked about, like agri and fintech and healthcare and edutech, can there be people who can be the hand-holding people, human touching human people, who understand the technology. They don't have to build the technology. They understand the technology, but then they are taking it to the end beneficiaries, and that's how the product companies are making their money. So that, I think, is a very promising idea for me, and definitely thinking about it quite a lot. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, that is very, very interesting that you have to localize this
Mhm.
transformative technology and you have to make use of the existing framework that we have. I think I was very fascinated by this idea of actually using banking correspondents and having them sort of become better efficient with the use of generative AI, and that having a network effect in a tier 2 or tier 3 city. Because like you mentioned that you just can't throw a technology at these markets, you need the humans to
Yeah.
basically be that intermediary framework. So
Mhm.
talking a little about automation and this entire fear of AI taking away jobs, and you have always sort of alluded to the fact that Shrija, the human has to be there in the middle. So do you think this entire human in the loop model or the human AI agent combination, in fact people are talking the human agent, now the
Yes.
AI agent nomenclature,
Mhm.
the humans also human agent. So how do you see this future sort of panning out, the human agent plus the AI agent combination?
Uh, Thanks for that question again. I mean, I come from a services background, right? And IT services is what did a great turn for India in those 2 decades or
Yeah.
so, right? Creating so many jobs, pulling so many people out of poverty, uh, completely changing the trajectory of careers of so many people. All of that has happened because of IT.
Yeah.
And sometimes we tend to think that no matter what new technology comes, ultimately it's going to be built in India. But Gen AI is different, as you know. In that IT pyramid, a lot of these developer and tester jobs may not remain. Correct. And
Mhm.
so, from that perspective, what I was talking about earlier could be an opportunity, because those are the people who could be the middle bees who are understanding the technology and helping the end beneficiaries. Of course, they have to learn the skills of that domain. They have to understand banking or agri or healthcare or education, whatever it is. But then they could be those people. So I do see that if a lot of people are going to come under the footprint of this technology, then a lot of these jobs will be needed as well, and some of them could do that. So that's at the one end, just in continuation of what I said earlier. But to the other point also, and in fact, I wrote this last year in my LinkedIn article, and that thinking was this: that if an AI company is building a product, where is the data coming from? We talked about data is coming from the customer. So hence I talked about services companies being providing that solution. We see today that happening from Accenture to the smallest companies. They are the ones who are doing all the POCs for the enterprises to build those Gen AI applications and
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, however, what has happened is, you must have seen the MIT report, 95% of these projects fail and all of that. And the reason for that failure, and also hence continuing with the POC rather than getting to the steady state of actually deploying AI, is because what I talked about earlier, the reliable outcomes that enterprises expect. Enterprises don't want poetry from OpenAI or something like. They want reliable outcomes, and to my mind, those reliable outcomes are going to come because of a combination of agentic AI and human AI. So the services companies, in my mind, they are, we say that now people are going to lose jobs. What are the services companies going to do? I think the services companies will do very well, because enterprises will need them to build these reliable outcomes, and they will do it with agentic AI as well as human agents. Of course, the nature of human agents will be different. They will be more domain knowledge experts. I mean, come to think of it, all these services companies have so much strong relations with the enterprises. They have their contracts. They've been working with them for decades. They have the domain knowledge, so they can put together a combination of human and agentic AI to provide those reliable outcomes. So even if you talk about agentic AI, I think people will be needed to make sure that the solutions that are given by the agentic AI is actually reliably correct for the enterprises. Then that's where I see the need for people there as well. Having said that, it's going to be much smaller in number, different category of people, but I do believe that it will it's we are very far away from completely automatic agentic AI, and whether that is desirable or not is also a question. I think it's a good combination to have a human in the loop to do that. Earlier also we used to have human in the loop. One of our companies, data tech, which is AI in radiology, used a radiologist in the loop to make sure that the AI was correct. And the other benefit was, if they gave some feedback, it went to the machine. I'm talking about the
Mhm.
learning era. The machine became better. But even in the era of agentic AI, I think a combination is going to be the human in the loop, or whatever you call it, is going to be useful, because ultimately the enterprises care about reliable outcomes, and that's how AI is going to grow. So whatever you have to do, if put humans there, put humans there, but get the solutions right. That's what's going to happen.
So, Giri, tell me a little about this entire thinking about artificial intelligence. When the e-commerce wave happened in this country, we heard a lot of people saying that, okay, India has copy-paste entrepreneurs. The Amazon of India is being built here. The Uber of India is being built here. In the AI space, I mean, DeepSeek happened. I mean, these Chinese kids building a banger of a product. What are you hearing from your investors? Like you said, you have a Gulf view now, you have the US view now. Are they very, very happy where we are on the Gen AI Innovation Index, or do you think that it's still a very cut copy mindset that we still have here?
Initially, that was the case, I would say, and that was, to be honest, also because the investor money was also coming from outside,
Yeah.
and they were seeing that that model is working there. So let us see if Amazon is working there, or Flipkart would work here, and that's how it started. But we have come far, I think, from that, where now India specific products. In fact, our whole theory is catching them young in India, because then
Hmm.
they're having customers in India, they're solving a problem in India, and hopefully with B2B, the use cases will remain same internationally also. So that is what we are thinking about. So clearly now we are seeing not a copy paste. Maybe, I don't know, at least in the B2B space, I can talk about this. Maybe in the other spaces, horizontals and so on. But very difficult to see how that can work now. The chance that we have is for us to solve, our startups to solve some specific problems that we have here. And the B2B2C thing I talked about could have global benefits.
Implications, yeah.
These will not be developed in the US, for example, correct? So these are the solutions where you're putting the technology and the humans together to solve for a problem, is very much relevant for India and maybe half the world. So I do not worry about we being copy pasting, or at least our startups doing any copy pasting. In fact, they could be building something for India which could have large opportunities globally, because of the different needs that Indian markets had. I mean, we have, why I say we have come a long way, because initially all those products, we didn't have people who understood the global market, right? And now 20 years have gone and we've built products for India. A lot of successful companies have come out of India looking at Indians, what Indians need, and solving for them. So I think we are past that stage, and we could definitely focus on solving Indian problems which could have global implications.
Thanks for that, Giri. And the last question, I think we spoke quite a bit deeply about artificial intelligence, valuation from framework to AI first, AI native thinking, a cut copy paste model, building for India, India not being a DIY market, human in the loop, how automation is not necessarily the best solution to all the epinacia that we are sort of facing. Uh, Policy support. What do you think is the policy support which a transformative force like this really needs to really unleash its power in India, like
Mhm.
completely? I remember when I was a Chevening fellow, and in London, I think the entire UPI phenomenon, right? We were the cynosure of all eyes in the world,
Mhm.
right? People
Mhm.
had such admiration for us. Do you think we can do something as phenomenal as that for India? Will India have its Indian version of OpenAI? Will India have an NVIDIA version of itself? Do you think that's the right path to go on to?
Like I said earlier, we don't have to build another Nvidia, or we don't have to build another open AI, but we do have India stack, right?
Hmm.
So our differentiation could be on the data. I mean, the I talked about the diverse data of various languages and all of that. So some of our own AI people, like Kruthrim and Sarvam, are trying to digitize hordes of libraries and so on to try to build that. So that is quite unique to us, and that is what will give us benefits, rather than trying to build something that has already been built uh, uh, again. And the second part is the India stack. I see that as, like you said, UPI is world leading in terms of technology. We all have seen the benefits of it. It is a government built platform, but it is open for anybody to use. What better combination can you have, right? I mean, instead of thinking that a private company will come and build something like this, government is building that, but it is making it open. So an LLM kind of a layer on top of this OpenAI data, there's so much value. Sorry, not OpenAI, but
Yes, Jack.
India stack data can be such a big differentiator. So policy wise, I think government has done a lot of, what can they do? I mean, they can do the policies, they can help with infrastructure and all of that. So that's what they're strong at. And what that does is that pyramid gets built. Ultimately, if there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not lakhs of startups at the bottom of the pyramid, then somebody is going to bubble up and become really big. So that is what the government policy is helping with. But specifically, if you ask me, this data that we have, which is our differentiator, is what can provide us that push to make our own stake in the ground about what we can do. And we have already made a great start with India Stack. So I think we should think on those terms rather than trying to build something that somebody else is building.
I think enough food of thought for a lot of our listeners and people who are going to be sort of tuning in again to listen to this insightful podcast. I think a very, very meaningful conversation to get a very deep understanding on how to approach innovation, especially in the field of generative AI and taking it beyond metros as a phenomenon, and how it has to be a distributed kind of philosophy rather than a very centralized philosophy, especially for a nation like ours. Giri, now it's time to get into quick rapid fire. I've picked two questions for you. First one, what are you reading these days?
Oh, good. I've always have one book that I'm reading. The one that I'm reading now is called Thinking Strategically. I generally like to recommend the book after I finished it, but I'm halfway through it and I'll still recommend it. The one good thing, it's written by two professors, Avinash Dikshit and Professor Nalebuff. Good thing about it is it was originally written in 91. So it has stood the test of time, I must say. And sometimes we entrepreneurs, or we have not got formally, I don't have an MBA or something, we don't do this formally. So reading these books is very, very helpful for me personally. And when you apply it to in your own day-to-day kind of issues, so I'll recommend that very easily to everybody.
Okay, Giri, thanks for that recommendation. And I have to ask you, which I often ask a lot of people, one company which you passed on your anti portfolio and which you think that, okay, I wish I could have just like invested in it.
Yeah, I remember you had asked me this question in the last event also. So the thing is that we are not we are early stage, right? So the companies that we would have passed have not even grown to that stage where you would know the name. You would typically want to know a name that you knew, and then oh, you missed that one. That is very difficult for me to say, because maybe give us 10 years, and then maybe one of those companies that we missed will grow into a public company or something, and then mentioning that name would be easier and more helpful. Does that help?
Yeah, and it does not really help, but if you have to ask me, like, which tech company that you admire the most, which you think like you're completely overawed by that?
Yeah, that one is a simpler question than the previous one. I think I would say Sridhar Bamboo's company. So he and I mean a lot of Indian entrepreneurs would take his name because he's built something without VC money, completely from India. And to my earlier point, from a village near Chennai actually, and he's training people and getting them into this company and building products which are now world class, being sold everywhere. So that is a role model for everybody, I think.
Thanks for that, Giri, and thank you for joining us. Till the time we see you next, goodbye and good luck. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for having me. Really enjoyed this chat.
Thank you. Thanks, Giri. Bye bye. Take care.